I see JP's joined us. Hi, JP. And Joanne, hi. Oh, and there's Bev. I didn't see you tucked down there in the corner. Hi, Bev. That's Bev from St. Peter's.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I couldn't get in by touching the link, but I just put the password in and that worked fine.
Good. Yeah, we've had a few logistical challenges. Zoom's wonderful, but now and then it does a little, pulls a caveat on us. So
It's not perfect, no.
And Melinda, how's the grandson? You're on
Oh,
mute.
he's wonderful. He's wonderful as always. So smart and just like a little sponge right now, absorbing everything around him. Yeah. very
Perfect
cute.
in every way.
Perfect in every way.
That's the joy of grandchildren. I
Yeah.
don't recall my children ever being perfect in every way.
No, they were.
My grandchildren perfect in every way.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Oh dear.
I think we're all biased when it comes to our own grandchildren, right?
Oh,
I think
aren't
so.
we? Aren't we though? And that's a good thing.
It's the way it should be.
It is, no question. As we do move forward and get started, if everybody could, and I know most people do anyway, just go on mute so that we don't have too much background noise. Now and then we get some unusual background noise that decides to join us. And it's just very helpful not to have that. Can get distracting. I've been guilty of that myself, so I can speak with authority about it. So if no one would mind doing that, that would be great. And then when you have a wish to participate, if you would just put up your hand and come off of mute. And it is possible, depending how many are on, we have on the call, it is possible that I may not see your hand, depending how my screen's behaving at that particular moment. So Rhonda's going to give me a heads up if I'm not seeing someone, so that no one gets left out. And if worse comes to worse, please don't hesitate just to speak out and say, I've had my hand up, Linda, for 10 minutes and I haven't been recognized. So please don't be shy about that if you feel that somehow or another in the scheme of technology, you have been missed. Rhonda, do you want to give me the high sign when you think that we're good to go?
I think we can get to go. There may be still people coming on, but I think we can get started.
Okay, well, I think we'll just start in the usual way, and that will be by just going around and just saying, if you would, who you are, whether you're staff or board, the name of your house and the province that you're in. If you would do that, that would be great. Can we start there with you, Ian? You're on mute, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Ian Johnson, board member, Abbeyfield, Vancouver, and Abbeyfield, Vancouver House.
Thank you.
Sorry interrupting. Larry still can't join. It's not coming on his computer. It's saying error.
Oh, so Larry can't join.
Yeah, I told him do manually, but he doesn't know how.
Okay,
Well,
so
maybe-
that email that, sorry guys, I just sent that out to everyone that was on that list. I just sent that out again. So people can try it that way, but on that email, there's like 2 places you can link to get in, so, but I'm, again, I forwarded it all to everyone, so we'll see how that goes.
Okay, they may be just, once they get that, Rhonda, people may just join.
Yep, that's
Um,
fine.
Yeah,
There's Joe now.
I tried it on my phone and it works. The new
Good.
one.
good. The new one worked.
So just with technology as well, sometimes your Zoom will be deciding that it needs to do an update in the middle of things, and that happened a lot this week with people that I was Zooming with. So that may be slowing things down too for people. But I'll leave this off again. Linda, off you go.
Okay. Thank you for being so flexible about this, Rhonda, because I know you've sent it out to us 2 or 3 times because I received it. And yet mine wouldn't let me in either. And it's just, technology is just meant to frustrate us sometimes. If we can get on with our introductions then, Eileen, would you please speak next?
Good morning, everyone. Eileen Lau from Abbeyfield, Vancouver. So nice meeting you, everyone. I joined the board just early this year, so it was great to meet everyone here for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Violet.
Hi, my name is Violet Green. I'm newly elected president of Flow Seniors in Ottawa.
Very good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Ruben.
Hi, I'm from Armstrong in British Columbia, and I'm on the board there.
Thank you. Melinda.
I am, oh yeah. I am Melinda Hull, on the board and also staff at Abbeyfield Duncan in BC.
Thank you. And our Fort St. John, not in the fire, thank goodness. Please. You're on mute. You're on mute. There.
Hi,
we got you.
everyone. Rita from Fort St. John Abbeyfield House. I'm a board member there, and we are at the moment smoke-free.
Yes, hallelujah.
Yes,
Pat.
definitely.
And there's Peter there.
Pat, excuse me.
I'm Pat Aikens, Secretary at Abbeyfield Riverside, which is in Ottawa. We're a provisional member just a year now.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Bev.
Bev, I'm on the board at Abbeyfield St. Peter's, which is in Victoria.
Thank you. Joanne.
Joanne Robinson, board member, Abbeyfield, Canada. I am also now the executive director of Flow Seniors, and we are also a provisional member of Abbeyfield, Canada. We don't have a house yet, though, but anyway.
Soon. Vladimir. Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry, yeah, my name is Vladimir. I'm a new one, probably because I'm still young. And Larry yesterday introduced me to Abbey House. I like it very much. And he asked me if I wouldn't mind to join today your session to be observant. If it's fine with you, I can stay on. If it's a secret, it's fine.
It's not a secret. Are you, what is your role in Abbeyfield, Vladimir?
Today, I am a consultant, observant, whatever you can call me. Okay, but I want to see it. I like it, what he showed me yesterday. And I want to find out a little bit more about this one.
Very good. And are you looking at becoming a board member? Is that what you're looking at?
Maybe, I don't know yet. It's
Okay, I
possibility.
wondered, yeah.
It's like I said, I'm still young, so it's a future in front of me.
That's fine. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Peter, you're here. Oh, Peter, sound not working.
Okay. So Peter is our a new director to Abbeyfield, Canada. So this is his first experience meeting everybody.
And Joe?
Oh, you just muted yourself, Joe.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm with Abbeyfield Caledon, and recently I've become the president of Abbeyfield Canada.
Welcome, Joe. And JP?
Hi, everyone. I'm JP. I'm the executive director of Abbeyfield, Canada.
Rhonda, is there anyone I'm missing here?
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick look. Larry Shapiro just came on.
Okay.
Barb Steele is here. Nora McKnight is here. And I'm not sure who Diane is because I think it's a...
And okay, so carrying on, is Larry, are you connected yet? Do you want to introduce yourself? No. Barb, are you connected?
He is mute.
Yeah. Hi, yes, I'm Barb Steele. I am on the board of directors for Abbeyfield Riverside.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Norm.
Oh, are you speaking to me?
Nora.
Oh, hi, I'm at the airport, so there's lots of noise here. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm Nora McKnight, and I'm with Abbeyfield Riverside in Ottawa. I am on the board, and we have a provisional house in Ottawa.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for, I have your name incorrectly written down here, so thank you. Diane?
Diane, say hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Larry.
Okay, I was using Diane's iPad. I'm back on my own computer now. I'd like to say hello, welcome everybody. And as far as the secret Vladimir, I did have a chance. He was with me when I welcomed the Hanari Gumi Japanese community people. And I didn't tell him anything about Abbeyfield. I just sat him down in the meeting and he fell in love with Abbeyfield and the concept. And I just gave him the advantage, Linda, of the tour, and he couldn't have been more impressed. And the answer is yes, I'm going to find him a place on the board. I'm just looking for the right place. Thank you.
Linda, sorry. Linda, did you get Eileen?
Yes, we got Eileen, right? Unless there's two Eileens,
No,
are there?
no, I'm just going through my list.
Okay.
And Barbara Steele?
Yeah, we got Barb. Okay. Is there anybody I've missed? If so, please.
James Galloway.
Oh, Jim, are you online here now?
I am now. Hi, it's Jim Galloway, Abbeyfield, Ottawa.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everybody, I hope. I'm sorry, everyone, that we've had this technological challenge, but there's no promise that we wouldn't have it again, unfortunately. It's just technology, and every so often it does these things. I've decided it has a mind of its own, and that's what happens. Okay, and thanks for being...
So Linda, just so as we begin, just let confirm that we have 20 participants to see today.
Okay. And it's the day before Father's Day. So I guess all the gentlemen are looking forward to great celebrations tomorrow. Okay.
I don't have any voice here, but let's see.
Okay, moving along. The subject today is living in Abbeyfield, and I'm sure when you looked at the very short summary we sent out, it's a huge conversation. It's a huge conversation. So we will do our very best to get through it to the extent we're able today. We'll touch on all the areas. What we may find at the end of it is that we need a lot more conversation because we're not able to comprehensively embrace the various topics to the extent we would like to. But we're going to leap in and we're going to do our best. And I think for all of us, we start from a common place. I'm not going to be, by the way, a talking head. It may sound that way at the moment, but I am not. But we all start from the common place of hoping that and wanting each of our residents to have the best possible positive experience when they come to Abbeyfield. I think we do know that for some of them, everyone comes for different reasons. Some people just come because they just can't manage anymore and they're looking for another location where they can be as independent as possible, but they know they need some support. Others are semi-coerced by their families, and I won't say forced, but strongly encouraged to relocate. And for some, I think it is strictly they're so lonely and they know they need company. And there are many other reasons, I'm sure, for people to come, but those are just a few. And so the beginning of setting up a positive experience for them is where we're going to start with this discussion. And I'd like to just invite comments and suggestions from people around, in your view and given your experience, what and how is the best way to set up a positive experience for residents? Anyone like to start?
It's interesting. At one point, we thought we would designate one existing resident to be sort of the go-to, the mentor, and, you know, give them just help them figure out what the laundry schedule was and meal times and where everything was. But we found they actually didn't like that. So it's trial and error to a large extent. We always welcome a new resident with a bouquet of flowers or a plant for their garden and a card, and just make sure they understand this is their home, not just a temporary place, but their home. And it's the best we do.
Larry.
You know, Linda, I have, are you getting an echo or can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. I don't know about others.
Okay, good. No,
it's good.
Great. We have an interesting situation here in Vancouver where we have two houses that are connected together physically. The corridor will allow all kinds of movement back and forth. And for some reason, there is very little migration between the houses. So your point is well taken. And to answer the question is, I find with common activities that will invite people with like interest, for instance, the garden we put in, the raised gardens we put in last year, have them mingling together. The barbecue we had to celebrate Abbeyfield Week, again, brought them all together. And I believe we have certain classes like chair yoga, etc. And I believe that is the only answer, Linda, is to have activities and keep having different activities and hope that one of these activities at least will interest everybody, and this way they get to meet each other.
Thank you. I think that's a very good suggestion, Larry. Can I just back up a tiny bit here for a minute? When we're trying to set up this positive experience, how many of you look at various pieces of documentation that they have to fill out before they come in. And do you think that the way that's done is significant? Does anyone want to leap in on that? Melinda.
Well,
I think Melinda, you had your hand up.
I did. I'm puzzling over your last question there a little bit about the significance. What I was going to say, Linda, is for our new residents to try and create that good first feeling about the house is we have a little welcome package, and it includes a house manual with all the kind of do's and don'ts and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of funny, but I put a little stuffy on their windowsill, so when they're moving in, there's their welcome package and their little dog or their bear or whatever. And then also, I think recognizing that it takes them days, weeks maybe to settle in, and try not to overwhelm them with too much information right off the bat. I know all that paperwork that you have to do when somebody moves in, they're only getting kind of half of it. So I usually like to go back and sort of review it after they've been there a few days, and just keep checking in with them, making sure that they are settling in and you know, that they're okay.
Excellent.
If I could comment, Linda, one of the things we have found that be very effective is to invite potential new residents to join the residents there for lunch or have a meal with them. And what that seems to have done is encourage some of the residents that are there to really reach out, you know, and to start to befriend them over the lunch or etc. So that when they arrive, they've already kind of made some connections. And I think if we can encourage the residents to be part of our welcoming group, it would be a positive experience for them. That seems to be the most effective process that we have done. And our paperwork, unfortunately, in our home, we are fortunately one or the other, we spend a lot more time trying to ensure that the family is connected to the process, so that obviously as we move down the road, and should we require additional or other support that we can provide or care that we can provide, that the family is well engaged in that process. So we probably spend more time with the family relationship during that paperwork time than we do with the individual themselves. And as I said, we try to encourage our existing residents to be part of that welcoming group. And currently, we're very fortunate to have a very welcoming group of residents, so that it works very well.
Excellent. Does anybody else do that? Does anyone else include a residence in, because this is a very positive thing to do if one's able, encourage potential residents to attend, for instance, your barbecue, Larry, or other activities that are going on in the Christmas party or whatever in the house prior to them becoming residents. Do others do that? And have you found that as a positive thing? Debbie, you're nodding your head, yes.
Rita has her hand up as well.
Oh, Rita. Yeah, Rita, please.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We invite them for a tour, and then the package for the most part goes home with the family, and they bring it back partially filled out. And then when they do bring it back, we invite them for lunch or supper, whichever suits them, with a family member, not just them by themselves. And then sometimes they come a second time if they're still kind of questioning it. They might come back and have another look, and we will invite them again for lunch or supper. And that usually really makes them feel more at home or more welcome, I guess, and more comfortable about moving in. And we always kind of stress the fact that it's such a big change for a lot of them that we tell them, give yourselves at least 3 months to get settled in and get used to everything.
Mhm.
And that really seems to help them and you know, squash their anxiety, I guess, a little bit, because for a lot of them, it is a major change.
It is.
Yes.
And that's a very important point that you make, is the major change and the time frame around adjusting to that change. It isn't an instant thing by any means. And how nice that you include the family member or sponsor or whomever to join with them when you have them to dinner. And I think, Melinda, your point of reviewing the paperwork after the initial time they have, because it's important, it's very important, there's no question. But when you go through it initially, often people are quite tense and they take it and they're quite conscientious about it. But nonetheless, you know, we're all like that. We don't always absorb everything. And I would think you find that very helpful when you do it. That's a very good point. Anybody else got anything they would like to raise here?
Yeah, excuse me, Linda, you don't seem to be acknowledging the electronic yellow hands.
Sorry, I'm
that are
trying to
up.
help. Larry, you're on the list, so.
Oh, no, yeah, but I don't think Linda's noticing them.
Yeah, but I'm
But-
letting her know. She does know. So Larry
Oh,
and
good.
then,
Okay, pardon
and
me.
then Vladimir.
Yes, Larry, part of the problem is at a certain number of individuals, they aren't displayed on my screen, and that's why Rhonda's alerting me.
Oh, good, okay.
Vladimir, do you want to enter this, please, Vladimir?
You asking me?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yeah, I am an outsider, but from my experience, I would like to mention something. Maybe you're doing it, maybe not, but after 1 month, to give them a paper with like survey, ask them what they expected to get in the place they moved in, what they would like to do, what they like, what's going on here, and the same question, ask their close relative what you think, which the guarantee, whatever you think they know a little bit better about them, because some people shy, they won't say anything. So it's nice to have a feedback from their relative, and this way you can get them more involved with what's going on, and they would feel the part of the family, because you know yourself, people different. And someone like previous one mentioned, it's any movement, doesn't matter what age you're in, from one place to another one, even to better place, it's a shock. It takes time to get acquainted. But in our age, when you move to a completely different surrounding, it's really a shock. It takes time to get used to it. And this is the best time to get them involved, to make them feel like they're part of the family, and maybe push them or something that they get involved a little bit, not too much, doesn't matter. So then they would feel more comfortable, and it's a good advertising for this Abbey house, because they spread the word. They always have somebody left outside, a future maybe one. So this is my thinking about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Larry?
Just to follow up on what Vladimir said, and to answer your question, which nobody seems to be answering, we've gone back to your first point. Yes, we have a serious assessment process. Of course, things change and people adapt, and people's behavior is different. from their first impression that they're trying to make to reality quite often. But a word that Vladimir used, expectations, I'm going to speak to our people that do the intake and definitely have expectations put on that initial assessment form. Joe was talking about different things as well, which brought to mind a buddy system is very often helpful. And I've appointed a buddy to some of the new residents that come in because I felt it was helpful and my judgment was correct. It was helpful. But to go back, which I'm trying to address, what you were asking, the question we're trying to respond to, Linda, is yes, there should be an assessment and those expectations should be on there, and the follow-up that Vladimir was making reference to down the road, 2 or 3 months, whatever, to see if those expectations have been met is a very good point. And I think it's something we should concentrate on as well. And if they haven't been met, it's important to know that as well.
That's right. So clarity of expectations is very important when people come in, right? I think that's what you're saying, yes, is how important it is to be clear about what we expect as the house board, our parameters, which are outlined in our resident agreement, because we don't want people thinking that we're one way when in fact we aren't. And when it's laid out clearly, then people can understand that. And also, what about the sponsor here? As Rita's referred to, involving them in the initial, with dinner and so on. What about with the paperwork and so on? Because we do expect a lot from our sponsors, don't we? Right at the front end, we want them to be really clear that they have a responsibility both to the resident and really to support the resident and indirectly supporting us in the event that they have to perchance move along to somewhere else. What about prep time with them? Does anybody have a particular method they use, Bev?
I actually have a question because we're not that clear on what we should be asking of the sponsors. I mean, we try to explain to them if the resident is sick or has to go to hospital, we get them involved or that sort of thing. And I always encourage them to maybe volunteer, but I don't have a very good grasp of what we should ask of our sponsors. Can you help me?
Does anyone want to weigh in on this and tell Bev what you do and your reasons for that?
Melinda here.
Yeah. Yes, Melinda.
We were very lucky to receive a copy of the sponsor form from Port Alberni House, and I think it's great. I could certainly share it around if they're with that, because it just sort of lays out point by point all the expectations of the sponsor, and we use it all the time. It's really handy.
And do you find it's helped in terms of when you have needed the support of the sponsor? Have you been able to refer back to that? If
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. So Melinda, if people would like a copy of that, do you want to disperse it yourself, or do you want to send it to Rhonda and she could send it out with the information? Rhonda, what would you, I shouldn't be volunteering you.
You can send it to me, and I think the other good letter letter agreement is St. Benedict's as well, which they probably kind of work together. So it sends those two options.
And they have a good, the model, the manual that St. Benedict's has is just so you are aware, is a very good one. It's, of course, as all manuals are, the minute they're out, they're dated and they need changing, which is the frustrating part of them, of course. But it's pretty up to date. And if anyone wants that, this is just an aside, you could let Rhonda know and she would be able to forward that to you. Or for that matter, I could if she didn't have it at her fingertips. We're going to revisit some of this clarity of expectations. We'll get into that again when we get to relationships, and also when we get to transitioning to another level of care, because
Right.
everything here interrelates. Larry, did you have your hand back up?
Yes. One of the most important things, Linda, with regard to the relationship you have with the sponsors is that we must realize that we're taking in a lot of older people whose condition is deteriorating on a daily basis. So what is certainly inevitable and predictable is that one day they're going to require care, and certainly more care than Abbeyfield can offer. And the process that takes is so important and very frustrating, and this should be addressed at the beginning and continually, because one day that day is going to arrive, and you don't want to start negotiations with these sponsors at that time, because you'll be disappointed most of the time, because you'll find a lot of the responsibility is going to fall on you as an Abbeyfield administrator, and you'll be dealing with the local health authority. So, but any help we can get with this, of course, it could be established at the beginning. I agree. And also one other thing, it kind of irks me so much, Linda. There's so many great models of different contracts and manuals, etc. We should have an Abbeyfield standard. You know which one look the best. Please share it. And if each one wants to modify it in any way and improve it and enhance it, they should advise you to that too. And we'll just keep a common standard that's always improving. I'd really like somebody to do that. And I think that falls in your wheelhouse.
Yes, it will be. Rhonda has tried to, via the website, collate information and have it available to people. I'm not sure how well used that website is, but it has a lot of information on it. And I think that would be, and that's a very valuable comment. And I think everyone would probably agree with you on that. The team pages have a whole lot of that information. And perhaps, Rhonda, I could ask you if you could send out to everyone again, because I know I periodically lose the password, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that does that, or puts it away and forgets where I put it, because I have so many passwords. And if you could perhaps send that out again to people, the password, so they could go in and take a look at the standards that are there. And absolutely a lot of resource information is there, Larry. And I think it's well worth a wander through the websites. Takes a bit of patience, but I think it's well worth it for the information that's harbored there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need to move on here.
Yeah.
This is on to our next point that we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
because it too is very important, and that's ongoing relationship building. And why is this important? I think that's the first big question, and I think most of us know that. But would someone like to start this conversation around why it's important? Don't everyone leap in at once here.
Okay, so, Linda, I'm not even clear on the question. The relationship between who?
Well, that's going to be the next thing I was going to ask, but we could start with that. There's so many key people that we need to keep relationships with, and staff, for example, the residents themselves, the sponsors, the family members, the community leaders, supporters of Abbeyfield. There's all sorts of people that we need to keep relationships established with. So I would like to ask you why is this important? Because I'm sure all of you do it, whether it's consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously, you do it, I'm sure. Who does it consciously?
I think that somebody mentioned that it was important to maintain relationships with sponsors in order to ensure that when the resident needed to move on, that relationship was solid and the sponsor was not taken by surprise and they were ready to take responsibility for that.
Yes. Anyone else want to? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Linda, one of the things that I found, and I'm not sure where I've seen it, I've looked in a lot of different places, but one of the relationships with the sponsor and the resident is talking about next steps. So I know that some houses have a agreement that's kind of like, where do you see yourself in 3 years or 5 years? What's your next step planning? That way the conversation is beginning before there's a crisis, and then people are already thinking about next step. And Melinda has her hand up.
Hi. I was just thinking of something that maybe wouldn't come to everyone's mind right away, but one relationship that I really look after carefully is with tradesmen. We have a big old house that there's always something going wrong with it. So I have a list of my tradespeople, electrician, plumber, HVAC, etc. And I just make sure that we're really loyal to them, that I always call them, that when they do some work for us, that I, put it on Facebook or website, whatnot, to thank them. And there's always a plate of cookies for the guys when they come and work on something in the house, and just things like that, because we really need them.
Yes.
Good
Thank
point.
you, Melinda. We do. And that's a very good, I actually had left that off my list. That's a really good addition. I think part of this, where we're going with a lot of this conversation, is that we are looking ahead. I wanted to pick up on Miranda's comment. We are looking ahead as we build relationships. We're looking to the future, and we're relying on people to be engaged with us. And we have worked on that engagement so that when all throughout the resident stay, it feels warm and inclusive for them. And beyond that, when the time does come, if we have to transition on somewhere else, we have thought ahead about it, and with strong relationships, it does make that particular step much easier. Has anybody got an example of that, or that they like to give? I see you nodding, Bev.
Ruben's been trying to get in.
Actually, I'm thinking more of some of the problems, because some of our resident sponsors are now aging too and are not in as good a health as they were at the beginning. So that is a problem in itself for us.
That's a good point to raise, and that certainly is, if anyone hasn't had that problem, I think most may have encountered it, where the sponsor is no longer really capable of being that sponsor. And then what do we do? Because that's the next step. Who knows that one? Vladimir.
I just thinking about maybe us giving the sponsor, put in the wheel or somewhere, what happened if something happened with sponsor? What happened with that person, his sponsor? Who is going to continue looking after it? It should be like a chain. It's not just that person responsible for the rest of the life. Anything can happen with us. So it should be something over there. I don't know, part of the will of something or part of agreement. Who will continue taking care, or something like this one? Who we should contact just in case if something happened to that person, to the sponsor.
So have a plan for the next step. if it's necessary.
It's exactly, yes, not to stop because you take responsibility.
Mhm. Joe, you have your, oh, Ruben, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, go with Ruben here. He's been trying.
Hi,
Ruben?
I guess you're asking for an example. And 6 months ago in Armstrong, we had 2 vacancies, and I guess that's not a good situation. We had an applicant, elderly lady, and we were anxious to put her in. She needed a place to go to. However, there were quite a few issues that couldn't be resolved. Finding a sponsor, dealing with other things. Her 3 family members were all in New Zealand. So eventually, yes, we said, we can work this out. It'll work out. So she came in. And now we've, after a number of meetings, and eventually one of the daughters did come back from New Zealand just to visit, and we had 2 or 3 meetings with her and with a friend who she then eventually obtained, who is acting sponsor. And after 4 or 5 months, it seems as though it's got resolved. But we rushed into that situation, and it was a problem. It was somebody who was desperate, didn't understand the situation. We tried to help her. So, got to be cautious.
That's a very good point, Ruben, because periodically I've certainly been involved directly or indirectly in situations where because many of our houses run pretty close to the line financially. We can't sit for too long with an empty room in some cases. And there's a lot of reasons around that, but that's just a fact that happens sometimes. And there is a tendency, and it's human nature, if someone comes along and wants the room, and we really, really feel that we need to fill it, and they more or less are appropriate, more or less, that sometimes we relax a little bit on some of our vigilance and perhaps end up in a situation with a resident who's not necessarily appropriate. In your case, Ruben, you worked that out, but in some instances that just doesn't work out very well. So I think once again, if we default back to our original assessments and being prudent about adhering to those, then we can avoid some unfortunate pitfalls. Because we're not all as fortunate as Ruben in that through patience and persistence that worked out for that particular resident. Just something to be aware of as we go along. How many have been caught in that ever, where you've sort of, in your enthusiasm to think someone's appropriate, taken a resident that in hindsight, you were filled with regret about that decision?
Never.
Anybody prepared to fess up on that one?
Linda,
yes.
you know, I've had assessments taken and I've had people lie in the assessment. We are now demanding information from the doctors themselves.
Yes. And how many people do that? Most houses have, I think, a medical form that has to be filled out by the residents or by the doctor for the resident. And on that form, certainly on the one we use at St. Andrews, and we have a line in there that speaks to, I can't remember the exact wording, mental competency. And like, have they been tested? Has the such and such a test been used? And because one of the huge problems for Abbeyfields, is my observation anyway, is if you admit someone with dementia, we cannot safely look after them. I mean, it's sad, and we would love to be able to, but we can't. And so we are putting them in a risk situation if we miss that those signs of dementia. And that's a whole other subject, the early signs of dementia, et cetera. But the physician is assuming they have one. Of course, there's a catch. We have that on ours. Does anybody else have it in their agreement? A medical form where, and within that form, we identify a question around mental competency.
We do.
We do.
If perchance you don't, it might be an idea to include it. And we'd be happy. I mean, I'm sure many of us would be happy to share what we have. Or as Rhonda, in the case of that, a form like that, is there something on the team pages?
I'm not sure in particular. I mean, there's a couple of application forms that might have that included. Linda, just to give you the list, I have a statement, Ian, and then Bev.
Ian and Bev. Okay, thank you. Okay, Rhonda, next. You're up.
Okay, so our board at Abbeyfield Durham are having a conversation. I mean, we have people, and like everyone else, we have people who live with us for like 10 or 12 years at a time. And that first assessment obviously gets out of date really quickly. So we are going through the process of trying to set up a month, like a yearly review of their medical stuff. What are your medications? Because they would tell us we asked them when they first arrived, but obviously that changes pretty regularly. So we update that information. And if we've got a concern, then maybe asking for a new doctor's report. So again, setting a system whether it's once a year or whatever, it's a big piece. And then the other thing through that is that some of the houses that I've been working with since I've been here, they've had sponsors that have either died themselves or moved away out of the country. So you need to stay in touch with that too, with the resident. Who is your current sponsor? Let's write it down properly. Let's make sure we've got the right information so we can again keep them engaged all the way. So Ian and Bev are next.
Okay. And that goes back, if I may, that goes back to relationship building again. It fits right in there again. So Ian, you wanted to?
Yeah, slightly different. We'll talk about what has to be done. Who is accountable and responsible for making it so? Is it a board responsibility, or do involve staff, house coordinators, or even delegate it to somebody?
Good question. Often staff alert people. Often the first signs are picked up by staff. I don't know how many boards have someone delegated. I know St. Andrews does, a person, or we have two people actually delegated to the sort of health and welfare of residents. And they would then address that with sponsors. How do other people do it? Jim, were you putting your hand up or nodding, or I'm not sure.
Joe has his hand up and Larry has his hand up.
Okay.
And Bev.
Oh, Bev, you're next, actually.
And I'm kind of going backwards, but something that might seem obvious, but when you're doing the interview, the in-person interview, and the sponsor is usually there, or a family member, you have to be really aware of making sure the resident is answering your questions and not the sponsor, because it's awfully easy for the daughter or somebody to be responding. And I'd like to make sure the questions are being addressed to and being answered by the potential resident.
Very good. Good point. Thank you. Joe, you had your hand up.
I wanted to go back a bit too. One of the things that we find very effective is having regular messages going to the sponsors, so that we try once a month or every 5 or 6 weeks to just update our sponsors as to things that have occurred, so that they feel, we see them in the home occasionally, but this way we keep them going. And switching to the kind of assessment aspect, much like Rhonda has said, we are moving towards a kind of yearly review with the sponsor and the residents is to talk about not only their health, but their social kind of interactions that going on and changes and their thoughts. I think it's a good idea. We've been fortunate recently to hire, or not to hire, to have a geriatric assessment nurse join our board. And she's forming a baseline for all our residents by meeting with them so that we have something that we can relate to as each year passes, so that those changes are noted, and we help the family and the individual residents especially accept and understand that there are changes happening. Because sometimes those changes are reasonably subtle to the individual, but to the staff and to the board, sometimes they pick it up over time, and it's just very important to kind of keep that going from our perspective.
So you're really building those relationships.
Pardon me?
You're really building those relationships.
Yes, building those relationships.
And it just pays off in the end so much, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it is the board to a great extent. I mean, obviously the staff have a day-to-day involvement, and they're involved in we consult with them as as their observations on a regular basis. But the actual kind of discussion engagement tends to happen mostly at the board level.
Yes, and it all starts with the clarity when they come in, and it continues throughout, and the building of relationships. Now, is there a last comment on this? Because I'd like us to move on to the warning signs of problems. Larry.
I think it's quite important, Linda, that you and I particularly share a wonderful resource regarding dementia, and that resource name is Lindsay Grasso.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
She's in the society, and I believe that you should have a little chat with her and see at what time in the development of Alzheimer's, because even if we bring people in with no sign of Alzheimer's and it starts to develop, when is the ideal time to have a file open, and what help? She's a fantastic resource. We have to use them. And it just came to mind when someone said that they had another great board member with the kind of background and experience that we're using. Let's use her. And I mean, we can, the organization she works for is provincial. So I think we can share her with all the houses.
Thanks, Larry. I actually have had a conversation with Lindsay with a view to the future, and perhaps a way of incorporating her into a presentation. And it's nice to know, Joe, that you've got someone too with that kind of background. That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to move us along here to the warning signs of potential problems, because there definitely are some. And I think we're probably all within this group able to identify those, and perhaps even a few others. So we've laid our expectations out clearly. Our residents are in our house, and they're happy, and they're moving along, and we've maintained our relationships with numerous people. However, despite all our very, very good intentions, we cannot prevent the aging process from happening. And so different warning signs do emerge from the residents that are fairly obvious, and some not so obvious. So let's talk a bit about those signs and what you have in your experience observed, and what others can maybe learn from those experiences. Does anyone want to start off? There's several categories of these: behavioral and physical. And let's start with behavioral, just to target it down a little bit. Melinda.
So behavioral changes that we noticed in different residents, just maybe not showing up for meals on time, having to go and get them, bring them to meals. One resident, we noticed she was kind of doing a hoarding thing with, it was kind of odd. It was with paper products like napkins and Kleenex and that kind of thing. Just maybe changes in their personality, just doing things that we weren't used to seeing them do.
Okay, great. Who else would like to comment on this? Because this one's
Barbara?
Yeah, my mom had Alzheimer's for 10 years before she passed away. And the thing about dementia, and I don't know if this is specific to Alzheimer's or common to all dementia, is that a lot of people have can develop ways of hiding.
Yeah.
That their mental acuity is somehow diminishing. And my mother was particularly good at this in the sense that she just participated less and less in the conversations. And so I think it's important in order to catch things early enough to ensure that you address them before they become critical. And then, like, what are you going to do because you've got nowhere to put the person, that you become really aware, to Melinda's point, any change in behavior. And it can be just, they become quieter and they don't talk as much as they used to, or maybe they don't have the appetite they used to have, and it can be small stuff that you would normally disregard as, oh, well, they're just, tired, or they're just being them. But you really have to pay attention to small changes in behavior of that nature.
Thank you very much, Barb. Okay, who am I missing, Rhonda?
I think I don't see any other hands up at the second.
Has anybody found that the behavior such as someone who perhaps wasn't a complainer becomes a type of chronic complainer and begins to be very critical of things, or takes exception to a particular resident? There's so many little different ways that behavior can demonstrate itself. And, or becomes very entitled, very demanding. Jim.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me? I guess we had a classic case of that this year. Somebody moved in, the medical report said that there had been a touch of dementia at some point in time, but his doctors and the health people consulted said it was well under control. But quite soon after he moved in, he was a loud guy that used to want to be the center of everything. And he wanted to talk to all the residents after one of the meals. And at which point, one of the ladies that had been there for some time sort of interrupted him, which he took the wrong way. And I think words to the effect that "I will see you out of here" were uttered. That was reported immediately to we have a part-time manager who thought she would deal with it, and did over the next month. So unfortunately, it did not get to the board until there were one or two other instances of it. At which point of time, it really was out of control, and he had to go. And we discovered that his sponsor was in fact the wife of his minister, and claimed that she really didn't know much about him at all, or know him very well, that he just needed a bit of paper signed so that he could move into Abbeyfield. And so they had signed the piece of paper, and she didn't seem to have a clue as to what her responsibilities were. So anyway, we went through the whole gambit of things that we have to do to get him out of there, and it was very unpleasant for everybody. And even after he'd moved on, he still is a nuisance to to a particular female resident, has managed to even get her, she changed the telephone number, he's managed to get the new unlisted number and carry on. So just when things get out of hand, they really do get out of hand. So all the precautions you can put in up front are worth doing. I hope I answered the question, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd like to also point out that we've talked about a lot of negative behaviors that you would automatically go, oh, we can't put up with that. Sometimes the behavior change is actually something, oh, that's sweet. They're more affectionate. They're like, my mother started hugging my dad and she was not a hugger. And even those need to click, right? Because if it's not a typical behavior, you know, something's going on. And I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but I know in Ontario to get somebody care is years. So you can't wait for it to get bad before you address the problem.
And that's a very good point. And yes, there's positive changes as well. The point is the change. I see Joel has got his hand up there. Joe, what did you have something you wanted to?
I was just going to say, what this conversation makes me think that we need to really find a linkage with Alzheimer's Canada and really get access to some of it. I had the pleasure of being the chair of the Alzheimer's strategy in Ontario and back a few years ago, and headed up their training activities. And so there are programs out there that would help our staff, I think. But there also sounds to me like we could get some advice and we could get some maybe support across Canada on the topic, because I know in Abbeyfield County here, we have two individuals, one who is in quite moderate, medium level, I'd say, of Alzheimer's, and another one who's in mild, and they're remaining in the home. We're coping with them. Yes, there is some risk involved, but in both cases, we've had our staff trained on gentle persuasions and a few other things so that they are alert to the kinds of behaviors, both good and bad, that occur. I mean, and I do want to stress there are good behaviors that develop in this time too. So I think it might be worth us just figuring how we can give all ourselves a little more support in this area. Anyway, that's just.
Thank you, Joe. Larry, we've got, as Larry mentioned previously, Lindsay Grasso, who was on the board of Vancouver House, works for the Alzheimer's Society. And so we do have a very positive link there. Larry, do you want to add anything to that or just leave it?
Yeah, no. I definitely would. As James used an expression, out of hand. You have to, and we all have to understand the effect that these incidents have on the entire house and everybody in there. And this is why it's really important. It's not about particularly the resident, the subject resident that needs more care than we can offer, but it's got to be done quickly because it has a terrible effect on the whole the whole environment in the house and on the whole feeling in the house, and affects a tremendous negative effect.
We're going to revisit this as when we get to the final question, which won't be long now, transitioning to another level of care, and picking up on the early intervention on that, and sort of some doing what we need to do a little earlier to anticipate if possible. This whole Alzheimer's area, I think clearly or dementia area, I should say, because it's not just specific to that, is something we can pick up on for the future, perhaps around maybe another clubhouse that's focused strictly on this. It's certainly an important subject.
I think one conversation is not going to be enough to handle this.
No,
and if we get some of the grant money that we put out to really focusing on independence and such, will give us a bit more room to do that. One of the things that, again, this is from personal experience, at our house and in my family, that, again, being aware of changes and responding to that really quickly is because UTIs can certainly look like a dementia issue. And
Absolutely.
can be fixed by doctor engagement. Also, so the UTI and then any other medical changes or prescription changes, all of that can have a really quick impact on folks.
Yes, it can.
And if we're not watching it and calling the sponsor right away saying, this is a sudden change, this person needs an appointment with a doctor as soon as we can, I think is a key note.
Yes, thank you. That leads us very clearly into the physical. We talked about behavioral, but there are also physical indicators. And a UTI, for anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's urinary tract infection. Yeah. And it's one that has a physical manifestations, and it can very well present as confusion with behavioral, other behavioral tendencies.
Serious.
Yes, very. And it's very important to get checked up if someone's demonstrating fairly sudden, unusual behavior like confusion. And what happens often is electrolytes, never mind, get out of balance, etc. Okay, moving on to physical changes. And Rhonda also mentioned prescription changes, and that too can have quite an interesting impact. You've probably found that, many of you, with your residents, if there's been a prescription change. Other physical, what other things might suggest that there's a physical problem happening with the client, the resident?
Balance.
Balance, yeah.
When they're eating, they become messy. And when they're pouring coffee or something, just all of these general things that we all take for granted that seems to be out of sync.
Anyone else?
Incontinence.
Maybe even their personal hygiene, how they're dressing themselves, how they're keeping their clothes clean, etc. And general grooming changes. Is that physical? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, yes, inattention to self-care.
Yes.
And that could be either physical or behavioral, actually. It would fall in either area, but it's a good one to point out. And the mobility one, the balance, the mobility also. What about comprehension?
Sorry, Linda, Ian's hands up as well.
Pardon?
Ian?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
Ian.
been up for a while.
Yes, Ian.
Very briefly, so we're talking about what's happening. The staff who are there as cooks or so on often are sort of stepping up to deal with things that they shouldn't be dealing with but have to. Is there a sort of general experience of how to handle this type of issue? And so it's a slightly different aspect to what you're talking about, but I'm sure it's one of the concerns.
As people deteriorate, there is no question their needs increase. And in an ideal world, they're receiving supports from community care. But often real life circumstances are such that something happens. And I'm sure, has anybody had an experience where staff have had to step up and they have to come outside of the role that we assure them they're in? And that's a whole conversation with staff and a whole other issue. But you raise a very good point, Ian. And I think if we can spin that off, Rhonda, we'll note that, because I think
that's the way to go. Yeah, just make it a heading and deal with it separately.
I think so, because it is a whole other conversation, and an important one for sure.
Thank you.
Any other physical things that people would like to mention? Like, let me throw in, just to be a bit of a devil's advocate, when we're looking at hearing, and how it represents itself differently. Sometimes if you have a hearing problem, you can be misdiagnosed as having a behavioral or a early dementia problem when your problem really is a physical one. And it's that your hearing is compromised. Barbara, I can't hear you, but I see your mouth moving.
I was just thinking, and vice versa.
Yes, and vice versa, absolutely. Likewise, vision. Any of these things impede our ability to communicate in one way or another. And sometimes that's easy to write off or not quite pay the same amount of attention as we might to. Larry.
Linda, we get quite a bit of excellent service from the Vancouver Coastal Health people, but the other health authorities, do you think we should invite at least one of them to represent them at one of our meetings to see what has to be done to open up a file on these residents and what is the opportune time to do it?
Yeah, I think there's any relationship building, and here I go again,
yes,
is very positive. And I think to develop a good relationship with your health authority, that can do nothing but benefit Abbeyfield, because a lot of the problems we encounter, and we'll get to that in the next stage, which we're moving to in about 2 minutes, is when we transition, when the patient or the resident has to transition, it's interaction with that health authority, and they can help and they can impede, and they have their own huge bureaucratic structure they have to function in. So the better the relationship we can have with the health authority, the more beneficial that is to us. Has anybody got a well-established, good relationship with the health authority? Melinda and Joe. Melinda, do you want to comment on that?
It's kind of a love-hate relationship, but I do have one particular case manager that is kind of my go-to for finding things out or for telling her if we have a vacancy, that kind of thing. Sometimes our local hospital is phoned and said, oh, we have somebody that needs a place, and then I interview and they're just completely inappropriate for our setting. So and then they did send us one, and kind of, it was a few years ago, we felt a little coerced and rushed, and as always when you're rushed in these decision makings, it's not a good outcome, and it wasn't.
No.
So that's why I say it's a love-hate.
Yeah, and it's certainly worth the effort of developing a relationship with them. It sure is. And if we can go to transitioning to another level of care, we'll revisit this with that subject. And we're going to close down with that discussion. I'm sorry, we haven't fully explored each of these areas, that's for sure. But if we move on now, please, to transitioning to another level of care, knowing that one way we transition is through an emergency situation and the poor resident has to go to the hospital, they're sufficiently poorly that they cannot return. And that is an unfortunate transition, but it is a reality that all houses experience at one time or another. But the ones that are that we're really targeting for this conversation is if it's not an emergency. Now, we've done our good work at the front end with our good interactions around our documentation and our relationship building, all to make for two things: to make the stay of the residents as absolutely pleasant and inclusive as possible, and secondly, just looking ahead in the step process, determining how and when someone has to leave us and how much help that is if we have those relationships in place and we're able to make that transition smoothly. So what would you suggest to help make this as smooth as possible, this move on to another level of care? Now, many of us have done this already, so let's benefit from everybody's experience. Larry, your hand is up.
Linda, I think the problem, which was brought up by somebody, is that the wait time for anything resembling long-term care is months and getting worse all the time. This is the problem
Yes.
we're faced with, and this is what has to be addressed.
And so how do we do that? That's where we're trying to go with
Yeah,
this.
I know,
What-
I know.
Yeah.
What are the options, Linda? Linda, I think you were a nurse for a number of years. I'm just kidding. Of course, everybody knows that. But what is the answer? Because we have some problems. And again, I'm sympathetic and I'm empathetic to the poor resident, but the effect that it has on the house is not good.
Joe, let me wander down to you on this because you've got some expertise in this area.
Well, I mean, what we're doing locally here in Paladin is we're encouraging people to apply for long-term care early.
Yes.
Even before their symptoms are, to the point of view. That doesn't mean they'll, be on the list or anything, but they've at least been registered. It forces the authorities, in Ontario, it's the Home Care Association grouping, to at least interact with us, to interact with the family, get to know at least a connection. They're probably not going to do anything more for us at that point, but we're having that happening. And we've had some, I can think of 3 or 4 cases now where we've had quite a good amount of success in getting people into homes when they required greater care than we could provide. So I guess that early discussion with the family, and we raise it when people come and we're at the point of doing the intake interview, we raise the question of how one can access greater care than we can provide should that happen, should that develop in that situation. And we encourage them to start exploring at that point in time, and that means, getting out and seeing what facilities are available in our communities and understanding what the differences are between the various services that are available out there. And it's growing more complex every day. And we have, as Larry says, the backlog now is incredibly long. Only emergency cases are really getting admitted, and we're finding retirement homes that are now moving into basically care homes and care services, and in some cases even developing special wards, which we used to refer to as special care. So all this is happening. So the important thing I would say, is to get the families to start thinking about how this could evolve, because they're, in the end, they're the advocates, to be honest about it. We, as providers of support, are kind of outside the healthcare system. We are really not a healthcare facility, and we're not registered as an approved, in Ontario anyway, we're not registered as an approved agency in any way. So we don't have a lot of kind of clout in the system directly. We can try to, but as I said, it's really getting the families, I think, to start understanding and educating themselves about what's going to what they may have to deal with as time goes on.
It's that early conversation when you're looking at that paperwork and going through it with people, and likewise with the sponsor, and identifying then, in the event that this should happen, these are the responsibilities. And it is always a good idea to keep your eyes and ears open, do some research, anticipate the future. And in some cases, not many residents are up for it, but it's really nice if the sponsor in the early time takes the resident around and they actually get input into where they might like to go. But the conversations, because we can then revisit those conversations when the time comes that it has to be looked at more seriously. And if you stress it's serious from start, then it does have more meaning, and you get more buy-in Anyway, someone else talk about this a little bit. I'm defaulting to my old long-term care assessor role, and that's a long time ago.
Yeah, if I could also just add something from a personal point of view, I'm going through a situation where my wife's family parents are both needing now long-term care. And I've been involved with long-term care a lot of my life. And it is really surprising to me, the experience that they're having. They're all semi-professionals or professionals, but they're having the immense stress among themselves in trying to handle this. And surprisingly, not that knowledgeable about what exists out there. So again, the reinforcing the idea of encouraging the families to get involved early. Not saying somebody will require it, but if they do, they have to be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Rhonda, and
So
then
just-
Larry.
Sorry, yeah, I just made a note in the chat. When a resident or an elder agrees to sign up for a long-term care list, that often makes them more eligible for more age at homes.
Yes, it
skills.
does.
Yes, that
So,
does,
for-
yes.
so again, talking about a particular couple, they were getting 1 or 2 hours a week, and once they went on a list for like 8 houses as options, then now they're getting 10 hours a week, just because they're regulated. It's understood that they need more care. So that's a really positive turnaround for those people.
Yes, and I don't know about other provinces, but in British Columbia, it appears, or here on the Vancouver Island Health Authority, anyway, they like you to, before they'll do any waitlisting for anyone, they want to try them at home and with home supports, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes that does work out well. Sometimes it does not work out well. But it's almost like a step they're required to take before the following step of placement takes place. It feels that way. And the most effective people that I have ever seen with getting a resident in placement, it's a family member that is the most effective in my experience. Has anybody else found that?
I wish I did.
I wish I did. I hear in the background.
That's me.
Ruben, did you have your hand up there? Did I miss you?
No, I'm okay. Actually, I'll have to be leaving the meeting now.
Yeah, well, we're going to
Thank you
close it
very
down
much.
soon. Thank you very much for joining us. Larry, do you want to have a last comment?
Yeah, just one point. The government is emphasizing and devoting a heck of a lot of resources to this aging at home. Hundreds of millions of dollars, Linda. We have to start thinking of, we keep saying Abbeyfield is a home. We must keep emphasizing that and going after everything that's available, because their suites are their homes.
That's right.
And I think there is a lot of advantage to be taken with that in mind, and getting them social workers, which helps this whole process.
Good. Thank you. Any other final comments? Because I know we're out of time and everyone has a life. Beth.
May I just ask again for the password before we close down?
It's on the text. It's on the chat. I'll copy it again.
Okay.
Vladimir?
I think regarding the nation and corporate sponsors, it will be nice to involve associations, teachers association, engineering association, and discuss with them, because a lot of members, like I'm part of Ontario Teacher Association, retired. So we still, association going on, We have a lot of things going on, but if you get involved all this session, you can get a lot of knowledge, a lot of maybe some money, because their members can end up in our homes. So this could be another way to get some more money, some more
idea.
advice, some more help.
Thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. Any final words from anyone else? I know that this has been a just a really barely touching the surface of some of these subjects, but from this we will spin off, I hope, some more other concrete clubhouse topics, and I think several have been raised here actually as part of this conversation. And thank you everyone for coming and participating on what is certainly here on Vancouver Island a glorious Saturday. And all the men, because it's supposed to be your weekend to have a celebration because it's Father's Day. Thank you for joining us. And please don't hesitate to send any questions, concerns, suggestions forward to Rhonda and myself, and we'll very much follow up on those.
Just
So
Thank you so much, Linda, for leading such a very, very informative discussion. It's just great to listen to everybody and all their experiences that are shared, very applied on our day-to-day issues.
The team
Well, thank
page's
you.
password is on the chat for anyone else needs another copy of that. So,
Okay, and thank you very much, Rhonda, for your usual wonderful support and excellent contributions. Okay, farewell, everyone, and have a good rest of your week.